walked up to me, I'll take your order, he say.
Let me recommend our special. And
It's going like hotcakes. It's called nationality.
Nationality.
I love it, I say.
And you love it.
Never
I say.
heard of this before. I'll check it out anyway. Till a brother from my womb breathe on me one day. He said, research, study, and investigate. Spend 2 hours in a library. Truth there, I say. Nationality is the order of the day. Nationality is the order of the day.
To Moorish News, I am MD Love L, your host, and I have my guest today here in the studio, the Grand Sheikh Lionel Love L of the Moorish Science Temple of America, Islam Grand Sheikh.
Islam Sheikhs.
Welcome once again back to the show, Moorish News. We're going to be talking about the present Moroccan Empire Speaks, Part 2. We're going to be covering information on the Moors here in North America. Should Moors be present in court? Should Moors be represented by an attorney in court? We're going to be discussing that because there are some Moors that think that you shouldn't be in court. However, we know that the Prophet said, go to those who know the law and ask them in an intelligent tone. You will, in fact, receive a favorable reply. And we're also going to be talking about removing that presumption of the court and controlling the judge. Because there is a way to control the judge once you go into the courts. How to file your case and make the record is another thing we're going to be discussing. Also, the benefits of membership as a body politic that is foreign to the U.S. corporation. We're going to be also discussing, we have our own official nationality and identification laws, bringing back that old school law and natural law. We're going to talk about that, the natural law and the laws of nations, because before there was any other law, there was the laws of nation, that natural law. And what is the true value of being a first-class citizen and the associated duties? Taking the empire back one citizen at a time. So in talking about this, we're going to bring up a spirit, resurrect the spirit of truth of that old time religion. So need I say more? I'd like to introduce the Grand Sheikh once again and let him begin to talk about should Moors be represented by attorneys in court. What is your drawing on that, seeing that you are in Chancery Court right now, Grand Sheikh?
All praises due to Allah, the Lord, Governor, cherish and sustain the ruler of the worlds. I like to give hail and honors to the forerunner, Marcus Garvey, who represents purity. I like to give honors to the Prophet, who is a love thought made manifest. I like to give honors to all the ills and bays and their wills and ways. Islam is the law and the law shall live. Moors, not necessarily, well, let me just put it like this. The attorneys, lawyers, counselors, all of these terms mean different things. Let's get into what an attorney is. An attorney is someone that turns you over to the jurisdiction of the court. Now, a lawyer or a counselor is more like a coach, you know, someone that gives you advice. And to be quite frank, we can utilize the services of each, but we just have to understand the capacity in which they're operating. So if we are going to work with someone, an officer of the court, then we have to make sure that we're clear on the terms of the contract, because see, everything is based upon contract. So an attorney, to be sure, their first loyalty is to the court. So their clients are not the priority when it comes to their practice.
So is it possible to get an attorney whose client's case is their priority?
Well, you do have the rare exception where there are attorneys that place value over their clients. Well, more they prioritize their clients more so than the bar or the court or the judge or things of that nature. But that's very rare because, see, just like with any guild or any professional setting, it's all about advancing your career. You know, just like any doctor or lawyer, they're not there to, they're not going to, no matter how good they are in their practice is not going to be primarily geared towards how they focus on one or two clients overall.
So if there is such a thing, what are the benefits of hiring an attorney to be represented in the courts if you are a Moor?
Well, the benefits is that you acquire someone on your team that's aware of how the rules or the statutes or the procedures are working. And what occurs is they should have a great understanding of what your position is as far as being a first-class citizen as it relates to the statutes. And the problem is oftentimes the attorneys that represent people are incompetent in their understanding of how the law applies to first-class citizens. And this is because it has not, the courts and most of these proceedings have not been, let me just put it like this, it's been like a shockwave to the system.
So in other words, it sounds like what you're saying is that there can be an advantage in having an attorney if you can get them to understand your status.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is
now,
correct.
what is the greatest disadvantage for having an attorney? What is one of the greatest? Because I hear Moors often say that you should not have an attorney to represent you. What is the greatest, Grand Sheik, disadvantage of having an attorney, someone that you that is supposed to represent you? I don't think we understand what represent means.
The greatest the greatest disadvantage, Sheik, is that people tend to give their whole understanding over to the attorney. And what occurs is the presumption is that you are incompetent and you are of an inferior or minor status within the law. So that means that the presumption is that you do not understand the law, or neither are you competent to present yourself.
But most people are not. Most people do not understand the law, and most people are not competent of the law. And they put their whole heart and trust into an attorney. So what I am saying is, okay, I don't understand the law. I have no knowledge of the law. I'm a doctor, so I have to go to my buddy that's an attorney. So I'm trusting him to take care of everything. You're saying people should not do that? Or
Well, no, I'm not saying that people shouldn't do that. I'm just saying let us understand first. Now we get into something else.
Yes.
What is exactly the law? Because now you're talking about different things now. Constitution. When we say the United States Constitution, that is considered as the law. But now you have statutes, you have codes, you have rules,
aware.
You have regulations, and all of these are presumed to be the law, even though in many instances they are not. And so if a statute is on the books and it's not applicable to a free national citizen or a first-class citizen, then how can that be the law when it applies to that individual?
And so I'm clear on that, but what we're talking about here is, of course, should the Moors be represented? I think people need to understand what it means to have an attorney to represent you.
Oftentimes people speak about the Prophet Noble Ali having counsel represent him.
And he did, in fact.
Aaron Page or
Yes,
Aaron Payne Aaron Page Ill. Right. So that would be one of the clearest examples that, yes, we are permitted to have attorneys or counsel. Provided that they have an understanding of what our position and status is. Because let us also understand that the brother that was an attorney to the Prophet was also a member of the Moorish Science Temple of America.
Absolutely.
So
that makes a lot of sense.
He had an understanding of how they were moving back then. and how the law was applicable to all of the Moors in this status quo at that time.
So in fact, if you can have an attorney that understands the law, we're not talking statutes, rules, regulations, if this attorney can understand the law and he's clear on representing you and he understands your status, then that's something that can be considered as someone you can work with. Whether he's a conscious Moor or not, if he's willing to go according to the law and he's understanding the position, what's actually occurring within the case on the table, acknowledging your status as being indigenous to this land, then it's okay. Because if the prophet did it, then we have to say it's got to be on the record. It's okay.
It's all right.
And another thing, how the courts assume jurisdiction, because once you get inside the courts, that's another thing. Then there's the part, okay, now I have this case, I'm in court. How does the court assume jurisdiction and flip things?
Well, this is all based upon, and you hear Moors talk about the straw entity or the flesh and blood human being. This all goes back to the birth certificate. I believe we had mentioned that before.
Absolutely.
The birth certificate is the evidence of title being taken to a flesh and blood individual, human being. So basically what you have is a situation where you have a whole nation of people lost out at sea, docked away in some ship as chattel property.
Not breathing, eating, drinking, just locked away?
In the sense, because see, the term civilator mortuus means dead in the eyes of the law.
Oh my goodness.
So basically, you are, even though you're walking around living flesh, blood, breathing individual, in the law, you're considered as Night of the Living Dead, the zombies that are going. So this is actually what is going on in the law.
Right now.
When you walk into a courtroom, you're presumed to be one of the zombies.
So you're basically coming in as a dead person in court.
The presumption is
all
that
caps.
if you have all capital letters that is being expressed, which denotes a corporation. So you've been reduced to that of a corporate fiction.
So that's no presumption, that's a fact. And Illinois is a fact-finding state. And this is like a hidden contract because people are not aware of this. Normal people going to court to seek out justice have no clue that they're walking in as a dead individual in all caps.
But here's the thing though. It's already been signed in. And you are in agreement to everything because
ignorance is no excuse.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse.
So you mean to tell me that these dead people, hidden contract, the law don't care about the fact they're sleeping and did not know?
They're not. Just check this out. There's a scenario when you go into the courtroom, and usually what the judge will do is he will give instructions to everyone. Like say if you go to traffic court one day, the judge will give instructions. He will explain to everybody in attendance, when I call your name, please come up and approach the bench. It's almost like when they program you back during grammar school, where they say, okay, little Johnny, when you're here and you hear your name, raise your hand and say present.
Absolutely.
So the program has been instilled in you since before you could barely read or write. And so when you get to court and the instructions are given and you hear the nomen, it's all capital letters. They're not saying, okay, capital letter B, capital letter C, capital letter I. No, they're just saying it out. And the presumption is that you are that artificial entity. So when you respond and you come before the court, it's almost as if it's a resurrection of the judgment scene, where your soul is being called before its creator to give an account for what's been done during this life. So the judge is actually a representative of the eternal judge that we meet once we leave this plane. So it's all based upon natural law, how it's all working, how it's all moving.
Well, let's talk about moving that presumption of the court and basically controlling the judge. Because basically, that's the whole purpose of a court, to be able to get a remedy.
Right.
But if you have the judge practicing law from the bench, that's next to impossible.
Well, consider
so how do you remove that presumption?
Well, there's something that's known as the judicial canons.
Of the court. Oh, really?
Yes, judicial canons, and this is something that is provided for by the Supreme Court, the professional rules of the Supreme Court.
To control.
And these are rules that are, they're put in place so that the judges and the magistrates are clear on what they
Their
can
job
and cannot
is.
do. Now, these are rules that are recognized within that particular guild. So they're supposed to maintain a level of professionalism. They're supposed to remain fair at all times. They're not supposed to arbitrate from the bench or practice law from the bench. But here's an interesting thing. When most people, and I've noticed this because I've been involved in helping people throughout the various states, and the one consistent thing that I see, Sheikahs, is that when a person walks up in the courtroom, they're expecting to have to deal with the other side. But often what occurs is the judge or the person that's wearing the black robe is typically the one that they have to deal with. So that represents the gatekeeper. So people are normally thrown off balance, or they're thrown off guard because they go in there thinking they have to deal with the state or the other side, but it's actually the judge that's practicing law from the bench, to the point where the other side normally never really has to say anything.
So the canons are especially used so that the judge can obey and stay in his place, because no one is above the law now.
That is correct. The judge, see, now the presumption is that the judge is God in the courtroom, but let us understand this. The judge is merely a servant who has taken an oath to uphold the Constitution. And the whole job of the judge is to maintain the decorum of the courtroom and to maintain order, to make sure the parties are professional towards each other and the proceedings move forward in a timely fashion.
Well, they do have that little discretion, that little gray area, and that can make them feel mighty God-filled, because at that point it gives them the discretion to rule truthfully in the direction according to their understanding and knowledge of law. So the canons can be used, and for my listening audience, the canons, as you heard, can and should be used to make sure that the law is followed all the way across the board, from the plaintiff to the sheriff. So I thank you for that information, because we need to know the remedies, because once again, ignorance of the law is no excuse. And because you don't know, and because most of us don't know that because of that birth certificate, that we were basically left to see, paying back a national debt. And now it's time for us to wake up, because once the people begin to wake up and understand that they're basically that in reality there really is no money, and the credit system has to be put in place in order for us to be able to move forward with the law.
This picture, Sheikahs, is a perfect depiction of the prophet. He's standing on the land and on the water. And you notice he's bringing the sister who has humanity written on her womb out of the cares of the world. So this is symbolic of the rescue that had to be put in place in order for us to come back and be on an equal footing with all of the rest of the nations. And this is something that had to be done within the law.
Yes, absolutely. And another thing that needs to be understood is how to file your case and make the record. See, making the record is another thing, because you could go to court and you could talk and you could say a lot of things, volumes of things, but there's a way to effectively make the record. And I want you to go into that, Grand Sheik. How do you go to court and make sure you make the record? Because if you don't make the record, it's just like you haven't said anything or put your case can be dead if it does not make the record. It's just like you're not even bringing a case. Can you go into making the record so we can get a better understanding of how to make the record the moment you go into court?
Islam. Part of making a record is making sure that you file the paperwork properly and understanding the role that the clerk of the court has with regards to your case. Now, the presumption is that the judge is in control of the case and all this, that, the other. Actually, the true person that's in control and that has the true power is the clerk of the court, because it's the clerk of the court that's responsible for all parties making a record properly.
So what if I'm in another state and I want to file a case? What's the very first thing I do? Because I don't have any money to hire an attorney. That's number one. But I need to file this case. What do I do?
Well, they have certain provisions where they have fee waivers that could be utilized to file cases without paying any filing fees. As a matter of fact,
That's a new one.
everything that you see that when they're operating and they're doing business within the clerks or the court system, it's all based upon the statutes that they have in place. See, they can only operate off of one or two things. Either it's the constitutional law that's been put in place already, or it's the statutes that has been produced by the guild. Because see, there are two things that can be done with regards to how a case is moving forward. Constitutionally, it's usually the most simplest way because you only have 7 articles and 10 Bill of Rights. But see, when you get into these state statutes, the statutes can become so voluminous and there's so many statutes that they can almost seem to be endless.
Swallow up the Constitution.
The Constitution, whereas the statutes, by rule of thumb, is said to be based on the Constitution. But the Constitution, let us understand what the Constitution really is, okay? The Constitution is a restriction that's been placed upon the government so that they do not infringe on the rights of the people, who are the bosses, are the true bosses of government. So understand this, the way government works, the people are empowered to control the government. It's not supposed to be the other way around.
So the people move the government, so in fact the statutes have to be created by the attorneys and the judges and people that want to go through the loopholes in, out, over, under, and around.
Right, exactly. So
okay,
the statutes have been created for the guild, for the legal, lawful, because think about it. There was no need for the statutes and even the legal field or the legal careers as it is based on the Constitution.
Absolutely.
There is nothing in the Constitution that says that you have to be an attorney or a lawyer to fill the offices of senator, of congressman, of president, of judge,
Really?
or any
That's
of these
interesting.
other positions. So when did it become a standard of affairs or status quo for all of these positions within government to be filled by bar attorneys, when there is nothing in the United States Constitution that stipulates that you have to be a bar member to be in a position of influence or capacity within the government, whether it's as a congressman or a senator or any other executive or cabinet member or whatever, what have you.
And in addition to that, you don't have to be a bar member to defend and protect yourself as well.
Exactly.
So I don't know where that started out, but if you notice, most representatives, presidents, senators, they have that background,
Right.
attorney background, male or female, no matter the gender.
And let's just say this: we're not knocking them for that, and we're not saying that there's anything wrong with that.
Certainly
What
not.
we're saying is that there is nothing in the Constitution that presents a bar from any private member or a private citizen from demonstrating the law.
So in
there's no-
actuality, any man and woman that's wise and strong enough to open a book and read it enough to get the learning and understanding can stand before a judge and defend themselves. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That is correct. The Constitution
So
has pretty
how
much
do you
stipulated.
properly defend yourself? I mean, how do you properly defend your status and your birthright? Because, okay, say you got people out here with courage. Every day people are standing up in court. We see them. In the county, in the federal court, in chancery court. People are becoming more and more courageous, and rightfully so, because you have rights. And if you don't know your rights, then you assume to not have any. So the way to get started is I suggest that people do begin to wake up and take a stand. Because one thing about hiring an attorney, I know you all must be aware that it can be costly. And we're not here to say that we're not here to bash attorneys per se, but we are here to uplift our people and let them know that, yes, you can stand up and defend your birthright and your status inside the courts of law. And once you file your case and you make the record, then you need to worry about law governing all events, because the prophet did say that law govern all events. So that brings us to the Moorish Supreme Court of Equity, executive rulers of the Adept Chamber, Third Heaven, Moorish Mecca.
Well, Sheikhs, before you even go into that.
Before we get into that.
Yeah, we have to have a proper understanding of how the court system is working, because now we're about to get into the fact that we have our own courts. But before we can operate properly within our own courts, we have to understand what's being done within the courts as it stands right now, today, with regards to our status. Because, see, many
let's
of us
talk about how do you properly defend your status right now. Let's talk about that. Once you go into court, what is your status? Because most people don't even know what status is.
Well, that's, again, and this goes back to the order of operations as it pertains to courts all over the world, beginning with status, jurisdiction, venue, subject matter. So everything always starts with status. And the first thing that you want to do as a free national is you want to put your status on the record. You want to put the court on mandatory judicial notice. Mandatory judicial notice. Because, see, here's the idea. The idea is that all these entities, corporate body politics, are operating under presumption. So the presumption is that you're assumed to be property of the state.
A Negro, black, color,
Exactly.
African-American.
So that presumption needs to be removed, because at one point it was presumed that you were in the right status. So then you would have to declare if you were not in the right status. But now, the way they flipped the script with the system and they have all the birth certificates and the straw man, well, now you have to serve notice and you have to put the court on mandatory judicial notice, or whatever entity is that's seeking to do business with you, or contract, or whatever it is. You have to put them on mandatory judicial notice as to your true status. And then you can carry forward with the business and understand. This is what the prophet meant when he said, all men are now required to proclaim their free national status, or their nationality, before the nations of the earth.
So what is your status on the record and for the record?
Well, the status on the record and for the record is first-class citizen. Because, see, the only way you could be a first-class citizen within any government is you have to be indigenous to that land. And you have to have an understanding of who you are and operate as such.
Okay. So once the status has been put on the record and the court has been notified, what exactly occurs?
Once the court is notified, then you can proceed forward, and then you can present your information, because now the parties have been notified.
Your birthright, your status, your birthright, the parties are notified that they're dealing with a citizen, a free man or woman.
Well, it's just like, let's say you went to court in China or something. This is going to be the same thing. Before the court can have jurisdiction to adjudicate, they have to be aware of the status of the parties first.
I recall that. I was at court once with Cook County, and it was my first time ever noticing the judge he was calling people and sending them in the back. I mean, all type of young men going in the back. Some of them had jobs. They were in school. They were pleading for help. And at one point, they started calling Mexicans. And I could recall the judge saying, would you like me to call the Mexican consulate?
That's correct.
Each time he called a Mexican. Now, would that have something to do with status? Absolutely.
Yes, it does.
So there was someone to speak on behalf of the Mexicans because of the nationality that's attached to them. So once the status and the birthright has been established on the record, then we're prepared as Moors, as free citizens, to move forward with that case?
Well, then now that the presumption has been removed, you are prepared to move forward in the case. And if they should do anything in contrary to what they should do, because, see, there are certain initiatives that are in place with regards to how law enforcement is supposed to deal with free nationals. And I believe there is a blue book that's been produced by the Department of State with regards to how law enforcement is supposed to deal with free nationals or nationals that are not considered to be property of the state. All right? So we have to understand that when it comes to law, things are specific. You have to be specific when it comes to the law. For example, if you're citing the Constitution, you have to be exactly specific in that contract because there are many different constitutions.
So let's talk about the fact that the courts are recognizing the status and the birthrights of the Moors here in North America today. Because it's one thing to put your status on the record. There's another thing whether or not the courts that are presently here in North America are going to recognize the fact that, you know, we are free citizens and we do have birthrights and we do have a status. Is the court set up now to recognize the status of the so-called African Americans in the courts, the appellate courts and chancery courts and federal courts? Are they set up right now to acknowledge the status of the Moorish American Muslims here in North America?
Yes,
today?
yes and no. Yes, because in the system in and of itself is designed to accommodate us as Moors. The reason why I say no is because you have to have the employees and you have to have individuals in place that understand how things are moving with regards to nationality. And even though you have a lot of our people that are operating and are doing business within these courthouses and these governmental buildings, a lot of them tend to have a lack of understanding as to their true status as being Moors and the fact that they have there's a common denominator and that they have a relationship with the land and everything that's in the land. So the mentality of there's a certain element of fear that's present within a lot of our people because they're under the microscope in a lot of these workplaces. And that's because they're there under the status of being chattel property rather than being respected as the authority that the law emanates from. So that's why the prophet keyed in on the fact that nationality is, in fact, the order of the day. Because when our people have a better understanding of who they are, where they come from, and they can link themselves to the law and to the land, then we'll see a lot more stability with regards to the interactions that we have been having with other nations of the earth. Because again, this all goes back to the Negro problem that the prophet was talking about and how it's being solved. And the fact that the only way that this Negro problem can be solved is through the Moorish Science Temple of America, Islam.
Islam, thank you for that. The Moorish Science Temple of America is a body politic that has been hidden for quite some time now. And as the members wake up and realize, and as the leaders recognize and begin to understand, and as the Moorish Divine and National Movement come together, the remnant is ready to move forward to do what has to be done to help uplift the nation, because this is a movement that was prepared by the great God, sent through our holy and divine prophet to help put things on an equal footing, as you say, Grand Sheik.
And I wanted to explain about our court, the fact that we have our own law books, we have our own statutes. This is
absolutely.
considered our statutory
But
book.
I want to talk about the benefits of the membership
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed.
to a body politic that is foreign to the U.S. corporation.
Islam.
Because there are benefits, even so we're foreign and yet a part and parcel of. Let's talk about those benefits, Grand Sheik.
Well, one of the benefits of being foreign is that we can connect. See, this is where the constitutional protections come in with regards to the religious freedom. The Moorish Science Temple of America is foreign, but is domestic in the sense that it's filed within the state statute. But the opening or the portal that opens up is the fact that through religious freedom, we are accessing that which is divine and that which is foreign, because the peace and friendship treaty between the Morocco and U.S. Pretty much opens up the interaction. This is a contract between two nations, okay?
Absolutely.
Well, really, two empires in a sense, because this was supposed to be the culmination and the end of centuries of bloodshed, okay?
Yes, absolutely.
And so what it occurs is now after like 200 years of passage of time, you have this is the longest standing treaty that's been in place, and it's still exists,
enforced.
it's still in force. So it's still in force whether or not both of the parties are still holding up to the end. But by it still being enforced, the presumption internationally is that both parties are holding up both parts of their end.
Yes, it is.
So from the perspective of the world, it's presumed that we are still in the position of the benefactors that give these people recognition all these years ago.
But nothing can be further from the truth.
Right. Internally, this situation has been dire to such an extent that those of us that were representative of the treaty have fallen asleep to such a point where a prophet had to be sent to bring us back on an equal footing with other nations.
I'd like to read a few of the things that were agreed to by the treaty. It's very, very interesting. Stay with me, please.
And before you get into that, let us also understand this is coming from a special place. The law of nations. That is pretty much the premise that sets all this in place. Go ahead, Sheikah.
Treaty, the law of nations being
well, the law of
1836.
nations. The law of nations is a treatise that was, I believe, Vogel is some French guy, and but we also understand that these are these are works that come from us, the Moors. We were the ones that was responsible for
I just want to
Europeans
clarify
having
that.
a Renaissance. So
We're
a
clear
lot
that-
of the works that you see coming out of Europe and a lot of the Renaissance things and the Pythagorean theory and all these things, that's all Moorish in origin.
17, thank you, Grand Sheik, for that. Here are a few of the things that was in the treaty, and it makes so much sense.
Would you try to read
Merchants-
14? 14 is a good one to read.
Okay, I'll read 14. I'm going to read 17 right now. Merchants shall not be compelled to buy or sell any kind of goods, but such as they shall think proper, and may buy and sell all sorts of merchandise, but such as are prohibited to other Christian nations. Listen at this one. Okay, we want to read 14.
Because that deals with the favored nation's status.
Absolutely. Okay, we want to read another. Let's see. 18. All goods shall be weighed and examined before they are sent on board, and to avoid all detentions of vessels, no examination shall afterwards be made unless it shall first be proved that contraband goods have been sent on board, in which case the persons who took the contraband goods on board shall be punished according to the usage and customs of the country, and no other person whatever shall be injured, nor shall the ship or cargo incur any penalty or damage whatever. Now see, that means that you can be on that water protected. That treaty covers you, your goods aboard, no one's going to touch anything. Here's another one, 20. It is definitely a contract.
14, please? Because
Yes, I am looking for that, please.
Favored nation status.
Okay, now here's 21. A citizen of the United States should kill or wound a Moor, or on the contrary, if a Moor shall kill or wound a citizen of the United States, the law of the contrary shall take place and equal justice shall be rendered, the consul assisting at the trial. And if any delinquent shall make his escape, the consul shall not be answerable for him in any manner whatever. And we're going to read 14. Everyone has to be responsible for himself. 14, the commerce with the United States shall be on the same footing as in the commerce with Spain, or as that with the most favored nation for the time being, and their citizens shall be respected and esteemed and have full liberty, I like this, to pass and repass our country and seaports whenever they please without interruptions. That means now that we have cars, we should be able to travel on our land without our rights being infringed upon. According to this treaty, it's covering us in all areas. And this is why the treaty is so important, dating back to 1836.
Favored
This
nation
is why
status.
the
And see,
treaty is great.
This is where it comes when you hear about the United States being the greatest nation of all time. This is part of where that comes from, the favored nation status. See, you have to follow what they were saying. They said the same as in Spain. Recall what we did in Spain. It was because we went in Spain and we dropped all the science and we brought all the knowledge in that they had a renaissance. And they shared the favored nation status. I mean, just look at it for what it is. At one point in the history of this world, Spain was looked at as the top as far as economics, as far as education. People sent their children from the world over to the universities that we had erected in Moorish Spain. So, and if you look at what we did in Spain, you will see that a lot of what we did there correlates with what we did here. Because back in Spain, we didn't have discrimination. We had the mosques right next to the synagogues and the churches. We allowed everybody to worship according to their own consciousness.
But you never hear about that. People talk about the Dark Ages. They talk about Spain and how we forced people to do this, that, the other. But nothing can be further from the truth. We allowed men to practice and worship up under their own vine and fig tree.
Let me say this before
important.
Let me say this.
Go right
when
ahead.
you become a slave in Moorish Spain, you are if your master was a Muslim, upon you proclaiming al-Shahada, that means there's no God but Allah and Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad is his prophet, then you will be immediately set free from slavery. Upon proclaiming the Shahada and upon converting to the faith of Islam.
Well, slavery is a business here in North America. We all understand that.
But even
75,000 a head nearly now.
Even still, there was a certain protocol and there was a certain chivalry that was present within Moorish Spain.
Under the treaty,
But
civilized
when
people
you see,
do that.
But when you see in reverse, when our people were forced under the Christian faith, there was no freedom from slavery. Let us be clear about that. Let us understand that. And this is part of the reason why so many of us became disenfranchised.
Let's talk about the Grand Sheikh. Let's talk about the true value of being a citizen. Because basically, what was being displayed in Spain was citizenship, citizenry. There was citizenship. You were there. You were able to practice your religion. You were able to be respected. And in some cases, if you got with the right Moors, you were even set free. So we had civilization booming in Spain, even so it's not really talked about. But I want to talk about what is the true value of being a first-class citizen and the associated duties, because a lot of things came out of those, out of that nearly 800 years of Spain rule.
Well, according to the law of nations, we have a duty to uphold our own nation and our own laws. And this basically has to be done for our posterity. So it's like this, you know how they tell a story about George Washington and John Adams and all these characters being the founding fathers. It is impossible for a foreigner to be a founding father of somewhere, and he's from somewhere else, okay? So the first thing is getting our people to understand the value of being a first-class citizen from here, the greatest nation that this world has seen, and the potential for the greatness that we can have if we just get back on track to understanding who the true, because see, we also have to understand that in the services that we provided to help to build this great country, we were the ones that did it, whether you put it, we did it under Hook or Crook, under Lash or Flail.
Well, what's that true value of being a citizen here? What is it?
The true value of being a citizen is understanding when you're indigenous that you are actually the one that's in control and that you represent the law. It is up to us to enforce the law in order to save the nation.
So what makes you indigenous? Because people need to know. We need to get beneath the layers so they can understand what makes you indigenous to this land.
What makes us indigenous is that our forefathers came here a long, long time ago.
First.
We were the first ones here. And we were the first ones here it was like this. It was our forefathers that was digging up the rivers so that it would be easier to transport products through the land.
Absolutely. The Niger River now.
And not only that, and you had to have the rivers dredged before you had the railroads and all of that, because this was the way that goods and services were transported
products
through the land.
Absolutely.
And there is evidence in history of how we dredged rivers all throughout the world.
Would that be considered as old school law?
Well, that's the oldest school. That's as old as you could get back, as old as you could go. Because, see, it was our forefathers that originally received permission to set up over here in this land. And see, when you have that understanding, now you can come and you can present that 5-day notice to these people that's been here that haven't been paying, because now it is that time.
So who checks the people that haven't been paying and that have basically
well, that's
amnesia?
That's the first question. What you asked about, what is the benefit? Well,
Absolutely.
that is part of the
true
benefit,
value.
and that's part of the true value, and that is also part of the stated responsibilities. Because, see, by you being the true owner or the landlord, then it is up to you, or us per se, to bring that presentation to the people that have not paid. This is going to be
that
the
could be a form of shock.
But this is what's going to equalize everything out. Because, see, what's going to solve the Negro problem is when it's balanced out, and all these so-called, these people that think that they're something else rather than what they are actually, when they figure out they're actually the property owners, then that's going to change the perspective
everything
of everything, because these people that have been pretending to be racist and they're pretending like, oh, this is our country, they already perfectly automatically know that they're not from here.
I mean, they couldn't.
The whole world is aware. You see, that's just like if you come, like, okay, if there's a report of a burglary and you're a cop and you come there and you to bust the perpetrator, that perpetrator is going to be aware that that's not their house. You don't have to tell that crook that he's doing something wrong and that he's in somebody else's house.
Oh, my goodness.
You just go in and you bust the perp. Or if it's somebody that's been living in the place and they haven't paid rent the whole time, you don't have to tell them.
Wait a minute, brother. Wait a minute now. It's not like the children themselves. We're talking about a peace and friendship treaty of 1836.
It doesn't matter how many generations. No, ma'am. It doesn't matter how many generations.
It's on the books.
If you're an immigrant and you come over here from somewhere else, the same position still lies.
Well, what about the ones that say I was born here?
Well,
because we get that a lot. I'm an American.
Well,
I was born here.
Okay. There are plenty of people that are born here, but that are not necessarily indigenous. They would still be considered as immigrants because they are born from immigrants.
Their parents, where they came from. That's the root.
Right. So what we're dealing with now is the line of descent.
Absolutely.
And this is what nationality is really predicated upon. And this is the key when you're going into the courts. That presumption needs to be removed that you are chattel property of the state. Because, see, the state is playing the mama and the papa of everybody. And then when you walk up in that courtroom, the judge is acting in the capacity as trustee. So,
wow,
you are getting a benefit that you never knew that you was entitled to or never even wanted to be entitled to in the first place. And you're under a contract where you have no understanding of what's going on. So how can this contract be valid when there's so many elements that's been left out and you have no understanding of what you're a part of?
How do you wake thousands and millions of people up and get them to understand that as a result of your mother putting that footprint on that birth certificate, you became a slave? And you are being traded over some, I mean, how do you get people to understand this?
Well, maybe if you could get them to watch the movie The Matrix a couple of 100 times, that might be a start.
Oh, wow.
But on a more sincere note, that is key because, see, what our people need to understand is that if you are not your true self, then you are indeed, in fact, part of the matrix, that being a part of that which is artificial. Because that's part of the reason why people will put certain things in their paperwork with regards to the flesh and blood living being that stands before you. Because now when you walking into a courtroom, you're the only thing that's alive there. You're the only living thing, flesh, blood, breathing. Everything else is, well, think about it. Why do they say, all rise, court is now in session?
Rise. Oh my goodness.
Well, this is because this is the reenactment of the judgment day, where the soul is called before the judge to pass judgment.
Are you listening to this viewing
So
audience?
we have to understand that as it is above, so it is below. There is only one judge in the world.
A great God, Father's universe.
Now, all these other individuals are acting in that capacity. So we have to understand the judgment, well, anytime you walk into a courtroom, it is a reenactment of Judgment Day.
I get that. You gave me chills, just listening to that. Which brings me to our next question. Mercy, taking the empire back one citizen at a time. Basically, you all hear and you heard. Let's understand and take this slow, because this can be a lot. For a person that don't even have a clue, I tell you where we'll start. Everybody pull out your driver's license, social security card. You can also pull out a state ID. And please look at how your name is spelled. If you're looking at your state ID, no matter what state you're in, understand the state that you're being put in right now.
Passports too.
And your passports and your passport cards. You're looking at all capital letters. Now, in kindergarten, I remember my kindergarten teacher as far as back as I can remember her. She taught me the uppercase and the lowercase. And she got on me. Some of the children got their hands spanked.
Was that second grade or first grade? Or third? It couldn't be no letter in third grade.
Well, I learned how to write lowercase in kindergarten now.
In kindergarten?
In kindergarten. Preschool now. Okay, these babies know how to spell their names. They're writing their alphabets.
So we are clear on the fact that when you put anything in all capital letters, that denotes a corporate fiction.
A corpse.
And if you did that, then let's just get straight to the point, Sheikahs. If you had wrote your name in all capital letters, would that have been considered wrong?
Well, in school, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
my homework was marked with X's.
Why would they allow it to be put on the state ID? I mean, clearly this is a governmental entity, and they would know the rules of grammatical, English and the rules of grammar and how that applies to the language. So why would a state, not just one state, but all of these states?
Now that's a problem. If all of the states have everyone's name in all capital letters, I have a better question. Mm-hmm. Why aren't the citizens aware and questioning that when we all went through school at one point or another in our lives? Why hasn't anyone looked at those state IDs and anything else for that matter, looking at all those capital letters and wonder what's really going on? Because when you arrive at that point, welcome to the future. You have arrived at the door called life. Knock on that door. Detach yourself and cut that cord from the matrix. And don't ever forget what was said by Neo to Morpheus. Why are my eyes sore? Because you never used them. So if you've never used your eyes and you're in the matrix, guess what? You have never used your brain. You have never used your legs to walk. You have never used your eyes to see. You're dead. And if you recall, they had to find Pac, had to locate him before they was able to, bring him up out the matrix. They had to first locate him, so they had to go deep.
Well, he had to be brought back in stages, if I recall the movie. They had to go through a series of acupuncture.
The man was
needles.
totally
dead.
He
had
had
thousands of needles all over his body. And see, part of the reason is because his body had grown to full adult, but he had never used his legs. He never used any part of his body. He just sat in this pod for all his life, pretty much his whole
now, Grand
existence.
Sheik, let me say this. If
Islam.
he was not using his body, somebody else was. And the question is, who's using your mind today?
Well, he was
Who's
being used
using?
as a battery, if you recall.
He was a battery.
They held up, Morpheus held
The
up
agents.
the battery, and he said this is what had been done. And he pretty much explained the story, and flipped the script and said, hey, the machines had began to rely on us and use us as a source of energy rather than the other way around.
And that's the birth certificate demonstration that
Exactly.
the sister was trying to get us to understand.
Exactly.
We are being used, abused, raped, and molested.
And not knowing how. And that's really the biggest issue. We've been locked and stocked into this form of corporate slavery and not aware that we have to step up and do certain things to reclaim our status. And this is part of the reason why the prophet said, if you don't do nothing else,
Proclaim your nationality, which brings us to, what are we doing about it? I can hear y'all thoughts out there. And here's exactly what we're doing about it. This administration of the Moorish Science Temple of America. We are, in fact, we've gone to those who know the law, and we've asked them in an intelligent tone, and we have received a favorable reply. We do know this, that Cook County has recognized that we are, in fact, a body politic. After bringing all those books down, asking Mr. Davenport to give us permission to bring those books down from the courts, we were able to crack that book open and read from the Black Laws Dictionary what a body politic is.
Speaking
The
of
council
books,
didn't have to tell us that we know what it is.
Speaking of books, we will be reproducing literature for the people so that they will be able to read about all these monumental things that's been occurring.
Yes, we will,
Obviously,
because the
we
only way to
can't-
change your life, to change someone's life, is to change their literature. And
So
inside
said
the
the
literature, you can't look forward to books. And because we are the body that's standing up
we
in
will
front,
be providing.
we will be providing this information for all of the public to see. Remember who you are, and whatever you do, don't forget to proclaim your nationality. I am Assistant Grand Sheik to the Grand Sheik. I want to thank my team, Brother Voss, and also Brother Carl, please. They are excellent. I want to thank my guests, Grand Sheik Laville. And also, I want to give thanks to the ancestors for allowing their energy to flow through us. And I want to give most of all the highest thanks to the great God, the Father of this universe, for
Praise
sending
Allah.
us
Yes,
a holy and divine
Praise
prophet. I love you all with the love that will never die. Sisters,
y'all.
stay strong. I see y'all out there young and beautiful with all those babies. Don't give up. You have a right to stand strong. Brothers, get next to them, okay? I see y'all out there loving each other, loving the sisters. We are a nation of people, and please know, Allah has not forgotten about us. Save that food, that water, those supplies. It's bad out here. You see what's happening in Florida, Texas, all in the Caribbean. Don't think it's not going to come for you, okay? Because Allah is God. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you, Prophet.